All right, everybody, you should be able to see my screen here, and I'm just going to go straight into it. I'm going to start off with a really simple form here, the amendment. This is a TREC promulgated form for our use. This form is TREC number 39-8, which you can see at the bottom. Bernice is going to jump in on this with me as well. She's here to give some commentary too, but we're going to make it just really, really simple for you guys. So the first question is, when would you ever use an amendment? Well, an amendment changes anything that is in the contract, and it supersedes what's in the contract. So it's a pretty important form, and it's to make any changes. So first, we're going to insert our address here. Not asking for legal description. This is just street address and city, which is the informal description of a property. We have your paragraph or provision number 1, which is the seller and buyer amend the contract as follows. This would be having to do with sales price. So if you, for whatever reason, changed the cash portion or you change the sales price, that's what would go in paragraph number 1, A, B, and C. So really just straightforward here, right? You have a sales price change. You're not going to put anything in here because that has nothing to do with provision B, provision 2. It only has to do with provision 1. Anything sales price related is going to go in that provision. Paragraph number 2, and I'm going to kind of let Bernice expand on this one, but let's read it. The very first broker I had would always say, read the contract first and then call me. So let's read. Reading goes a long way. In addition to any repairs and treatments otherwise required by the contract, seller, at seller's expense, shall complete the following repairs and treatments. So, Bernice, when would I use this particular paragraph?
You would use that when there needs to be a repair done that was required or requested in the inspection report and that the buyer wants the seller to complete. So that's when you would use that. If you have a laundry list of items.
Well, let's do your way first. So what would be a simple one?
Service.
Seller to service.
Yeah.
HVAC. Do you want to do
HVAC.
that? Seller to service HVAC and ensure good bill of health prior to closing.
Okay.
So straightforward statement here. Now, I will say some pitfalls that agents fall into. Number 1, we cannot unlawfully practice law. So if you are using if-then statements, that's the wrong way to go about that. It should be factual, simple, concise information. We cannot be ambiguous. We have to be very specific. And so it needs to be an extremely specific. And to be really honest with you, even good bill of health is not extremely specific. You would want to say seller to service HVAC and confirm there are 0 repairs needed prior to close, and provide invoice. And I'm just going off the cuff here, but as you can see, I'm being more specific with my language. And that leaves no ambiguity, means that they're going to get the unit serviced, and there's going to confirm that there's 0 repairs that are needed prior to close, and they're going to provide an invoice. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now, to Bernice's point, if you've got a long laundry list, what would I insert in here, Bernice?
So if you've got a long laundry list, I would first start by numbering them or bullet point them. It's very difficult to read an amendment that just has a bunch of garble in there. It's very hard to follow, and things get missed by the sellers.
Okay,
as well.
But just if there's more that exceeds the paragraph spacing, what would you see? Say.
If you've got more items in there that exceed the little spot that you have there, do not create an attachment. Do not create anything like that. Just keep typing. Automatically, the forms will make a new form for you that will be a continuous part of this paragraph.
Okay.
So you do not, and it has the signature line and address. It has everything. So do not create a separate contract or separate,
now
form.
in the situation that you do need to create a separate form, how would you approach that?
Why would you need to create a separate form?
If for whatever reason you have 50, 60 items.
It'll keep continuing putting line items.
Okay, so there's another way, and that might be a method that Bernice uses. Everybody's different. You could also say see attached Exhibit A. And that would be a Word document or a Google document that would have all of the items lined out in the Exhibit A, if you needed the extra space for whatever reason. But what Bernice is saying is true. It'll automatically size, but if you did need the extra space, you could do that too. Okay, so the date in paragraph 9. So
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So also just real quick on this paragraph, do not say see attached inspection report and don't put anything in here. As David said, it has to be exactly what you want repaired.
Yeah.
The inspection report does not come out and line item everything. It'll say recommended or it'll say something like that. So do not Do not say see inspection report.
No ambiguous language. So yeah, very, very specific. Okay, so provision 3, the date in paragraph 9 of the contract is changed to X. So this has to do with the closing date. So remember, going back to the 1 to 4 family and it could be 1 to 4, it could be the condo contract. It's the same paragraph number. This has specifically to do with the closing date. So if you needed to close early, would you need an amendment? The answer would be no, because it's on or before. But if you need to close late for whatever reason, you bet your bottom dollar you better have this form, because if you don't close by the close date, you're in default and you're not in contract. So this is an extremely important paragraph and something you have to get figured out right away if you know that you're going to be closing late. Provision 4, I'll let Bernice explain this one. It's a little more intricate, so let's talk about provision 4.
Okay, so provision 4 basically is if the buyer wants a credit toward closing costs, that's where that would go in. It refers back to your 1 to 4 family contract. So that's where that amount would go in. I mean, obviously today we hardly ever use paragraph 12A 1B because no one's getting a credit for anything right now. We're just giving everything to the sellers. So, but
Pro
if you ever
tip
need
though.
it, you can. Yeah.
Pro tip though.
Yeah.
When would you use that, and why was that
You would
advantageous
use
to you?
For any minor repairs that they can't come to an agreement on, not anything that would be against the lender, approving the purchase or the insurance, but anything minor that they just can't come to an agreement on, like windows or something like that, you can say, all right, then we'll take a credit toward the windows of $3,000. Now your buyer may be really hard pressed on, I want those windows replaced. Well, now they can do that. So the $3,000 that they were going to bring to closing that the seller is now going to contribute, they can use that $3,000 to replace the windows. So that usually makes everybody happy.
Exactly. So if you think that $3,000 credit should go to the sales price, think again about being more strategic about that. You want to save them money on their closing costs, not necessarily on their sales price. Now, that has to be approved by the buyer, obviously. You can't just insert that in there and not ask them. So explain the difference between lowering the sales price and the closing costs credit, and they'll decide what is better.
And also, one more caveat on that, please ask the lender as well.
Yes.
How much, is there a max amount of credit the buyer can get? Because the worst thing that can happen is if you put too much money in there and the lender doesn't allow it, they will lose that money.
That's correct. Okay, now provision 5, the cost of lender required repairs and treatments as itemized on the attached list will be paid for as follow. X by seller and X by buyer. Obviously, you would only use that if you have any lender required repairs. So if you don't, you're not going to use that paragraph, and that's a pretty straightforward paragraph. Additional option fee. So buyer has paid an additional option fee of X for an extension of the unrestricted right to terminate on or before 5 p.m. on X date. And remember that the additional option fee will be credited or will not be credited. Here's something very serious here. You have to have consideration here. If it's 0, you may not have an option. So I don't care if it's $1. You better have some consideration here, because that's a requirement of the paragraph in order to have an option period. So be very wary of that. A lot of experienced agents don't realize that. So when would you use that paragraph? Well, let's just say that you are dealing with an older home. You've got a short option period. You only have 5 days. And everything under the sun is wrong with this property. Well, your buyer still wants to move forward, but they now have to get the option extended so they can pull more experts in to see what kind of repairs are needed. So if that's the case, you're going to request an additional option, and then you're going to ask for an additional, and then seller will probably want additional option fee, probably over $1. But at the very minimum, put a value in here, because you don't have an option if you don't have it.
And it has to be delivered.
And it has to be delivered, which now we can do that to the title company, which makes it a lot easier. All right, so paragraph 7, 8, and 9, I'll let Bernice kind of take this home for us and kind of wrap this up as quickly as possible. So.
Okay, so sometimes let's just say that the buyer is in their option period, they had 10 days, and for some reason they got the inspection done really fast, everything was done, and they're asking the seller for maybe some, credit back on closing costs and maybe some repairs, and everybody's happy with whatever corrections or changes that they're making, then the seller can ask the buyer to waive the remainder of their option period because they've already agreed to everything. So that will usually move a seller to go ahead and make those additional repairs or give you that credit if they know that you're not going to come back a day before your last day of your option period,
right,
and make some more changes or want some more money back or something like that. So that's a good one to use if you are trying to negotiate repairs and or other items, credits, before your option period is over. And I'm not talking about like just a day. I'm talking about like several days.
All right, you can do the rest.
Okay, and
Take it home.
paragraph number 8, the date for the buyer to give written notice to seller and buyer cannot obtain financing approval as set forth in the third-party financing addendum is changed to blank. Remember, this refers you back to your third-party financing addendum. Number 1, when was the executed date of the contract? Number 2, how many days did you have in there for financing? And number 3, last but not least, do not wait till the last day to do this. Do it. You should be making sure that you're talking with that lender. How's the financing look? We've only got 2 days, 3 days left on the financing period. So that way you're always in the loop and you're sending this way ahead of time to the listing agent so that they can get that approved and changed. Everybody still has to agree to that change, including the seller. And seller can also say no. So you don't want them to say no on the last day that you have. So make sure you do it ahead of time.
Other modifications?
Other modifications, really, again, nothing should really be put in here unless they're factual statements, and there's not another form for that, if you will. So for instance, you could put, this is just really, kind of silly, but maybe you might want to put something in there like, home to be professionally cleaned upon move out.
Yeah, and so how you would do that, guys, just to type it in here for you, is seller to professionally clean home prior to close and provide invoice. Of course, spell correctly. That'd be a good start. And that's it. So, and she's exactly right. Avoid using any. Where am I? Avoid using any if-then statements. And that should wrap it up. So then, of course, both parties have to agree. So you have buyer information here, seller information here, and then they have to actually execute it.
And let me just make one more quick point on the executed date. So always remember, the person that executes the amendment is the last person that had control of the amendment, basically.
Yep.
Their buyers or their sellers signed or initialed last. Everybody else has already signed. Then you can go ahead and execute that. Please make sure you send a copy to the listing agent, a copy to the title company, and a copy to the lender if you need to in regards to a credit for repairs.
Correct. So pro tip again. You will not send a copy of this amendment if it doesn't have anything to do with money. Right. So the lender's only going to care about the money portion. So they don't want to know about repairs. That's where they put their fingers in there and they go la 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 la. They don't want to know about it. It's not anything unethical. They just don't. It doesn't concern them. So it's only if something is in regarding to the finances. Right. And of course, there's always some gray involved with that. Call us if you have questions. Yeah. But for the most part, the lender's only going to see this if money is involved.
Change the price, or there's a credit to closing costs, basically.
Right, because of course there's lender required repairs, and of course if it needs a roof or something like that, the lender, the foundation, those kind of things, lender would care about those things. But for the most part, they're not going to see this unless it has to do with money. But you will have to give it to the title company as well, so they understand what's going on. They're in the loop, and everybody's communicating. So really easy form. I love this form because it can change the original agreement. This supersedes that. You can have an endless amount of amendments, I suppose.
Yeah, you can.
So,
and always remember too that the amendments are numbered. They start with number 1, number 2, because sometimes you're not just going to only have one amendment. Back in the day, we did have a lot of amendments. Yep. So you will lose track if you don't use the appropriate amendments. They're numbered from 1 through, I want to say 10, but that's on the part.
Correct.
Of the forms,
and another pro tip, if you do have a repair and a price change and a bunch of stuff happening in one, you can separate them as well.
Right.
And so get with us if you have questions on that, but that's another thing that you can do. So really cool form. I love it. Simple, straightforward, to the point. Again, amendment TREC number 39.8. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. And we'll talk to you guys on the next